Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. We've got a lot to get through today, and it's pretty editorial, but only because it's very important stuff. First off, shout out to our Tier 3 patrons, Peter Park and Shay Meehan. Along with all our other patrons, you make this service possible for all of us. Quick note on the polls, I've only gotten 3 responses to the poll for why people are not patrons, and I'm wondering what the barrier is there, if people just aren't responding or if they're having trouble accessing the poll. Now I kind of need a poll for why people aren't answering the polls. Anyway, if anyone wants to enlighten me on that, please shoot me an email at yangdailypodcast@gmail.com or direct message on Twitter at YangDailyCast. Also, of the 3 people who have responded, 2 answered other, which has me super curious. I was confident I'd provided just about all the reasons there could be, but clearly not if 2/3 of respondents didn't find their reason represented. If either of those 2 who answered other want to enlighten me on that, I would also appreciate it. Alright, on to the news. Did you know that Joe Biden has supported public financing of elections for many decades in Congress? Or that Mitch McConnell completely supported it as well in his youth, and now completely opposes it? Or that Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic Party have been trying to pass comprehensive public financing bills and consider it a top priority? I did not. Thank Lessig for pointing that out. Biden has said, quote, "Either all of America decides who runs for office or only a few people. It's as simple as that. If you want to change the electoral process in America and the way we handle issues, have public financing. I guarantee you it would change overnight." End quote. If you need more reason for getting rid of Mitch and voting for a Democratic Senate flip, as reported by CNN, McConnell spent his 35-year Senate career attacking public financing of elections, using filibusters when in the minority to prevent votes on bills containing it, and as Senate Majority Leader, refusing to schedule votes on public financing or any other campaign reform bills. In 2019, the House passed H.R. 1, historic democracy reform legislation, that featured a new small donor-based public matching fund system for federal elections. This proposed system of public financing is funded by a small surcharge on penalties and fees paid to the government by corporate executive lawbreakers. That's breakers, not makers. I know there's little difference these days. And wealthy tax cheats. The system would free office holders from the grip of lobbyists, empower tens of millions of Americans by combining their small donations with multiple public matching funds, and allow office holders to spend far less time raising money and more time serving. Not as good as democracy dollars in that it doesn't ensure everyone has money to donate, but better in that it has no upper limit on how much small donations can be boosted. A combination of the two would, of course, be fantastic. In addition to small donor financing and other campaign finance reforms, H.R. 1 includes groundbreaking reforms to address voter suppression and discrimination, partisan gerrymandering, and the unprecedented self-dealing and ethics abuses of Trump and his administration. McConnell refused to schedule H.R. 1 for a vote. He falsely declared the bill as providing new taxpayer subsidies for candidates and made clear he wanted no part of the comprehensive democracy reform legislation. A first priority of a Biden administration will be to lead on a comprehensive set of reforms like those reflected in H.R. 1. Pelosi has vowed H.R. 1 will be a top priority for the House in the 2021 Congress, as it was in the current one, where it was the first order of business. Schumer has also said that it would be a top priority if Dems win the Senate. This should be a wake-up call to anyone who says the parties are the same. Not only are they divided on supporting UBI, they are divided on empowering the people to choose their own representation in government. This legislation undergirds our entire democracy and governance of the country. That Biden has long championed reforms like democracy dollars gives me much more confidence that he is going to make a difference beyond just saving us from Trump. I cannot overstate the importance of campaign finance reform. I can say this about so many Biden policies, and I'll say it again. This alone is enough reason to vote for Joe Biden, regardless of your political leaning. Money should not decide who represents us. Merit should. In other big news, Andrew has been named chair of the advisory board of the Californians for Consumer Privacy, the organization responsible for the California Consumer Privacy Act, or CCPA, that gave data rights to Californians. They are now fighting for Proposition 24, the California Privacy Rights Act, or CPRA, which would strengthen those rights even further. Super cool to see Yang being brought in on so many fronts these days. I ran across a fascinating article on how the Great Depression engendered ideology that put a stop to the direct relationship between increased productivity and increased free time. I think it's worth reading the meat of it here. Quote, "In the 19th century, the common man, with justified aversion to such long hours on the job, began to fight for a shorter workweek. Champions for the workers claimed that fewer hours on the job would decrease fatigue and increase productivity. Indeed, they said fewer hours was the natural expression of the maturing industrial revolution. People would pursue learning, an educated and engaged citizenry would support our democracy. But all that came to a halt during the Depression. The workweek, having fallen dramatically from 60 hours at the turn of the century to 35 hours during the Depression, became locked in at 40 hours for many and has crept up to 50 or even 60 hours a week in recent years. Free time became equated with unemployment. In an effort to boost the economy and reduce unemployment, the New Deal established the 40-hour workweek and the government as the employer of last resort. Workers are educated to consider employment, not free time, to be their right as citizens. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of paycheck? Since the Depression, few Americans have thought of work reduction as a natural, continuous, and positive result of economic growth and increased productivity. Instead, additional leisure has been seen as a drain on the economy and the abandonment of economic progress. Families now have 3 jobs, work, home, and the repair of relationships damaged by even more time at the office. Even corporations with family-friendly policies subtly reward people who spend more time at work, whether they are more productive or not. The final piece of the puzzle snaps into place when we look at the shift in the religious attitude toward work that came with the rise of the Protestant ethic. Before that time, work was profane and religion was sacred. Afterward, work was seen as the arena where you worked out your salvation, and the evidence of successful religious life was a successful financial life." End quote. Given the fact that most of us are working 40 to 60 hours a week, it's easy to be ignorant of history and the fact that things were not always the way they are now. In fact, even as economists back in the day foretold of immense leisure time in the 21st century, we work more now than we did for the vast majority of human history, and not often doing work we would freely choose for ourselves. The truth is right in our language. Time we aren't working is called free time, implying that when we're at work, we are not free. While we may have more stuff, no rational assessment would rate this a higher quality of life. In my estimation, there is no greater proof that our economy is failing than this. What's worse is that we seem to have given up trying to improve, and instead embraced and enshrined our enslavement as a sort of religion of toil, workism as Treacle calls it. It's time to wake up. We have more than enough stuff to go around, we have the capability to automate most human labor, and we have higher needs than basic survival, one of which is freedom. It's time for UBI. As if we need another reason for UBI, an audit released this month by the Government Accountability Office shows that more than 110,000 people who filed an appeal for government disability benefits through the Social Security Administration between the years of 2008 and 2019 died before receiving a decision. Another 48,000 Americans filed for bankruptcy awaiting a benefits decision between 2014 and 2019. Auditors put the blame on wait times at the agency that ballooned to an average of more than 2 years at times during the past decade. Add this to your body of evidence for why conditional aid needs to be replaced with UBI. Here's something I never expected to say. Herman Cain, who died of COVID, is now tweeting from the grave that COVID isn't that deadly. Yeah. More accurately, his Twitter account is being used to continue spreading misinformation about COVID after he died from it. Some people truly have no boundaries. The narrative is that it's no big deal because most people who died of COVID have comorbidities listed on their cause of death. This narrative, of course, ignores the fact that many of the listed comorbidities, such as hypoxia or pneumonia, are directly caused by COVID. It ignores that even pre-existing comorbidities cover such a broad range of issues that most people have at least one. It ignores that COVID often creates new, long-lasting, and severe comorbidities in survivors, and it ignores that nothing about this changes the death count or how deadly COVID is. Get your facts straight, Undead Herman. The Trump campaign is following the leader with a string of lies in their advertising. Just today, we had Trump's White House Deputy Chief of Communications, Dan Scavino, spread a heavily doctored video where they took a clip of a news anchor interviewing Harry Belafonte, who fell asleep, and replaced Harry's entire screen with a doctored video of Biden sleeping, then edited the audio of the anchor to remove Harry's name. Except they didn't even do it very well because she actually still says Harry's name toward the end. I can't emphasize enough that this misinformation is coming from the Chief of Communications. There's a trust builder. The second instance was a clipped video from the Trump campaign itself of one of Biden's speeches where Biden quotes the Trump administration, saying that people won't be safe in Biden's America. Trump's campaign, of course, just clipped the quote part. I think that one might backfire on them, however, because it was actually a pretty good speech from Biden, which people are now watching after journalists spread it around while debunking the campaign propaganda. In it, Joe says, quote, "Since they have no agenda or vision for their second term, Trump and Pence are running on this, and I find it fascinating. You won't be safe in Joe Biden's America. And what's the proof? The violence we're seeing in Donald Trump's America. He keeps telling you that if he's president, you'll feel safe. Well, he is president, whether he knows it or not." End quote. Biden's campaign aide said, "This is what happens when you corner a rat." Scott had a 1-hour discussion of UBI and its interface with climate change on the Nth Dimension podcast. Some points he made were that UBI allows buying quality products instead of cheap, flimsy, wasteful products, buying more expensive green products, buying local, supporting companies who have green practices, affording to refuse jobs in polluting industries, and ditching unnecessary jobs that are basically just workfare. It's a great resource to refer climate activists to. Alex Morse and Robbie Goldstein's vote is today, September 1st. If you live in Massachusetts, make sure you get out and vote, assuming that you didn't already. Morse had a great ad about retiring career incumbents who aren't working for the people. Our democracy was created in opposition to dynasties, yet congressional seats have become just that. We need new ideas, new voices, new perspectives. Representing the people is not a career, it is a service. Yang and Ro Khanna will be having a discussion of UBI and emergency relief during the pandemic on Instagram today at 7 p.m. Eastern. Finally, if you dreamed of working for YangSpeaks, now's your chance if you have skills in video editing. They're looking for talented video editors who like politics, UBI, and uplifting conversations. It's a 100% remote position. To apply, email info@yangspeaks.com with your resume, rate, and reel. I want to see James Treacle get on this. He's got a great handle on the progressive approach of abolishing wage slavery and the conservative perspective as well, and obviously he's a great video editor. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Bookmark and share the campaign finance article, the workism article, and the Social Security audit. Check out Morse's ad. If you're a video editor, apply for the position at YangSpeaks. Help recruit other organizations to the cause and get everyone to sign the UBI petition. Flood Congress and Trump with calls, tweets, and letters using the ResistBot or Income Movement easy contacts below. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, United Way, or the H3 podcast thread. And don't forget to Yang Daily.